MSE. So, I mean, everybody should put in the mute mode. And another things, please kindly write your enrollment number and name in your chat box. Okay. So, what I'm telling you, I mean, today we are going to discuss on the block 15, 16, 17, 18. Okay, or if possible then you can discuss 25 also, because 25 is a I mean is it related to distance education. So rightly I told you the objectives of IGNOU. Due to this pandemic, I mean it's a right opportunity to join through this online system, this Google Meet app. So sitting in the home and sitting in the office and sitting in the working place, you are connecting in one platform, that is Google Meet. So my request to all of you, because you are a second year students, might be you know your fellow friends, our repeated efforts, I don't think much number of students are joining. It's very, I mean, it's not a good sign for us, because out of 200 students, only 10, 15, 20 students are joining. I don't think this is a good sign at all. So anyway, I mean, I request to all of you, if you know your friends, because you created a WhatsApp group, send a message, mail, you are trying to reach all of the students. Maybe there is a network problem, maybe there is a connectivity problem. Still, now everybody is Android set. I don't think it's a very difficult to join this class. Either the class is not effective, or class is not interesting, or something else. I don't know what is the reason. So if want any give to suggestion, kindly write to us, or mail is with you rc1@ignorant.institute in. You can send a WhatsApp to me. I mean, you have created a WhatsApp group. So if you want to give any suggestion, my mail ID is with you. Either you give your suggestion to my mail. So with these words, now I hand over the session to I mean Roma ma'am. So kindly now, I mean whatever ma'am is want to present. So the now the platform is ready for her. So ma'am, I welcome you to this today's session. So now I hand over the session to ma'am. Continue, ma'am.
Thank you so much, sir. And good afternoon to all the students who are listening to me through this online platform. Um, Today we will take up the topic Unit 15, 16, 17, 18, and if possible, we can also discuss Unit 25. So, let me share the is the sir, is that a slide visible, or I should share it?
Nah. No, ma'am.
Slide is not visible. Okay.
No. Microphone on कर No, slide is not visible.
Okay, sir. So that let me share this slide. Cancel again. I think present now, and then a window. It is that one. Yeah. Is it visible now?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Okay, so we can start. So Unit 15 talks about the education in the SAARC countries. Education in the SAARC countries, and in the Unit 16 we'll talk about the education scenario in Europe. So these are basically geopolitical regions. So when you talk about SAARC, SAARC is the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, it consists of a group of countries which are united for some reason of being in a particular geographical area. There are certain, they are bound by their historical, geographical, climatic, and various socio-economic features. And they also have a common backwardness in educational disadvantages. The reason we are studying the SAARC countries in a educational, sociology of education paper is because of this, because they also share a common backwardness of educational disadvantages. Okay, they are educationally backward because of their historical and geographical setting. They also have some problems which they uniquely, it's very unique to these countries. So, it is important to study these countries taking into account a geopolitical region. SAARC is basically a geopolitical region which, because of its certain uniqueness of a geopolitical, there are certain uniqueness of a geopolitical region, the regions which reflect certain perspective, judgments in making particular groupings bound by. Yes, yes, sir.
If you want to use Odia, you can use both the language.
Okay, fine, sir. So regions reflect certain perspective, किछि माने particular grouping, गोटे group अच्छी कि they are bound by certain किछि historical, किछि geographical, किछि climatic और किछि socio-economic feature अच्छी. For example, तमे माने you can see countries like India, countries like Sri Lanka, countries like Bhutan. So एमानंकर certain, they have a certain geographical uniqueness. Okay, so they also have certain historical and geographical uniqueness. So this is the reason they have constituted a geopolitical unit. Okay, it is because of their geography, and it is because of their politics they take up, because of being in a particular region. So this chapter deals with the economic and social scenario of SAARC region and discusses strategies adopted by the government of SAARC countries for education and education reforms. Basically, we are discussing this in an educational sociology of education, because we'll come across the माने केमिति तांकर एजुकेशन और एजुकेशनल रिफॉर्म केमिति गवर्नमेंट टेक अप करूचंती, बिकॉज आमे जानि छु कि सबु कंट्रीज रे किछि ना किछि एजुकेशनल प्रॉब्लम्स रहउची, और गवर्नमेंट of that country is taking that education into account. केमिति educational improve हबो, educational scenario improve हबो. You can also relate it to your own country, India, in which government is, trying year after year to educate, reform the education in how केमिति access बढ़िबो, केमिति पिला माने interest नेबे education पाई कि your own यूनिवर्सिटी यू सी ए जो तमरो ओपन लर्निंग जो होची डिस्टेंस मोड रे. So you can also see that these are also the steps taken by the government to actually include people more and more, so that access doesn't become a problem. So ei sabu countries re governments mane kichi kichi initiative sabu bele nouchanti to actually see their educational scenario, how the education system will change, because you already know that they are in a educational backwardness, because our countries mane ame jani chu are educationally backward. So there are a lot of efforts on the part of the government kemiti tankar educational scenario ta kemiti improve karibe. So a chapter re we will discuss the economic social scenario of SAARC countries, tankar literacy rate kete, tankar education pai ki what issues they are taking up, what is the important challenges they are facing. So eighth pai ki eta important, and this is there in your first we should know why are we studying something. So sociology of education re tomara SAARC ro darkar kono, and you should know why you are studying something before you study something hela. So SAARC ro darkar because जोटे geopolitical region रे केमिति educational scenario टा develop होची, that you all should know. जेमती यूरोप रे हमें डिस्कस करिबा स्पेसिफिकली इंडिया रे केमती भी होउची सेटा भी हमें डिस्कस करिबा so this is the important thing when you talk about the educational scenario तो सार्क कौन तो जियोपॉलिटिक्स ऊपर तो हमें डिस्कस करले व्हाट इज अ जियोपॉलिटिकल रीजन बट नाउ हमें जानिया को पड़ेगा सार्क कौन ओके तो सार्क स्टैंड्स फॉर साउथ एशियन एसोसिएशन फॉर रीजनल कोऑपरेशन तमे एबे जानी थिबो माने इफ यू आर अडेप्ट विथ न्यूज आजिकली जो कोविड-19 रो सिनेरियो रे हमर प्राइम मिनिस्टर कौन करथिले फर्स्ट गोटे सार्क मीटिंग नैथिले ना नाही कि हाउ टू improve the education how the SAARC countries should come together to address the COVID-19 pandemic हाँ कि नहीं so it is always important कि तुम माने पाखो पाखे जो country अच्छो how are you collectively responding to a problem so why did the prime minister take a call to unite the SAARC countries because of these so SAARC plays a very important role in understanding how education unfolds okay so on December 8, 1985 so the charter of SAARC was made by the governments of Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan and Sri Lanka. 7 South Asian countries. Okay, so these countries are all neighbors of India. You must be very aware of countries like Bangladesh, countries like Bhutan, countries like Maldives जोड़ा बहुत माने tourism पाई की बहुत माने is very famous for the tourists and then you always are very much adapt with the country of Pakistan and then Sri Lanka you know it very well so these countries constitute the SAARC nations and there are educational expansion to say in all these countries there has been a effort to for educational expansion but disparities lie देखो से माने united because से माने गोटे geopolitical region रे geographically but each country also has differences between them in the term of gender in the term of caste amo India re to caste is a very बहुत बड़ा problem as sociologist you should understand this and then also class rich and poor women and men these things a lot of disparities between one region so in spite we can say that we are all belonging to one region but there are also disparities within the region so how educational expansion is actually addressing these disparities that are existing within a region so that is the main concern because educational disparity कौन पाई होची because of your unequal access to education your unequal access to education creates disparities in education so you can always say that educational expansion is taking place through the government but there are still regional disparities within each country so you can say that in these countries there are 40% people below poverty line then there are 40% of non-literate population more than 40% dropout children competing primary education is very less so enrollment ratios within these countries are very less so ये जो dropout rate भी बहुत अच्छी अब तमे खाली enrollment बढ़ेले हबनी enrollment बढ़े कि तम माने actually you should always be enrollment बढ़े कि ना तमे कंटिन्यू करबा दरकार एजुकेशन इट्स नॉट दैट कि एनरोलमेंट बढ़े देले सब जिंसर समाधान नहीं जिवो सो ड्रॉप आउट रेट ये जो माने ए गुडा को भी सब आर चैलेंजेस बिफोर द गवर्नमेंट to address these issues also mane all these countries are also trying to SAARC agere ei challenges guda ko bahut adhika because to address the different enrollment ratios within countries okay you have enrollment ratio amo country re different ଅନ୍ୟ countries ରେ ବି enrollment ratios are very different. So each countries ରେ କେମିତି enrollment ratio ବଢିବ, କେମିତି drop out rate children ମାନଙ୍କର କମିବ. So with a growth of the economy, these things also need to be addressed. କେମିତି below poverty line, poverty is directly linked to your educational disadvantage, because educational disadvantage हुए because most of the people are below poverty line. So poverty line re educational disadvantage बहुत हुए, they cannot access. The main problem with education is your access. So these countries constitute 1/6 of the world's population, but face challenges a lot. Because tame India ro, you must be knowing, aware about the educational about the Indian educational problems. Okay, so educational problems to India population. India population is बहुत सार countries रे is the highest India's population देखिए गले. So in these countries we all face these kind of challenges. Okay, so this also needs to be taken care of. So educational scenario re kaana government is a government also provides education. Then you have NGOs, you have private sector, those who have also contributed a lot to the educational advancement. But there are still problems of access to education, out of school children, school dropouts, low adult literacy rate. You all have these kinds of problem, irrespective of the fact that government is trying its best to bring out the best education to you. So though enrollment has increased, but problems also increase. It's not that if we increase enrollment we also have addressed all the problems, but enrollment increase helle bhi problem persist karuchi. Okay, when you see our education rate both countries ru both come. Okay, so our enrollment bhi badhichi. The subsequent census, subsequent reports have claimed that the enrollments have increased, but problems are still persisting. Okay, though these countries are then again focusing on the Millennium Development Goals. Okay, these are certain goals, the Millennium Development Goals. These are certain goals. There are like 8 goals under this, and these provide benchmarks for measuring progress. Okay, so they are trying to for a certain attaining a certain target based on the benchmarks which is provided by the Millennium Development Goals. So they are trying to do it by 2000. They have tried to do it by 2015, but still there are a lot of problems. So achieving universal primary education is one of the Millennium Development Goals. There are a lot of Millennium Development Goals like eradication of extreme poverty. Then you have promotion of gender equality and to empower women. Then you have to reduce child mortality, improvement of maternal health, then combating HIV/AIDS. There are a lot of goals, 8 goals, but we are concerned here about education. So achieving universal primary education is one of the development goals that these countries are trying to achieve. Okay, so then we will discuss about the individual countries and what are the economy, what is the economy, then what is the educational prerogatives, what is the literacy rate. So we will discuss it. First we'll start with Bangladesh. Bangladesh, as you all know, is one of the poorest nations. You must always geographically know where is Bangladesh situated. Please, as a person who is giving you a lecture, you must go today, look at the map and find out where Bangladesh is and where all these countries are located. To understand some country, we need to understand what geography it is in. Okay, so Bangladesh is one of the poorest nations. Economy is underdeveloped. Agriculture employs 2/3 of its people. People mostly live in rural areas. they're educationally backward, though although it also has a small section of highly educated. Okay, so educated भी जोठी रहुचंती and educationally backward भी अधिका. So you find educationally backward people बहुत अधिका, and you find a very small section of the population which are highly educated. So education for the rich, basically, you know, uh, education for the rich is something which is very interesting, because education has always been a prerogative of the rich. You can still rely on private education, and still you can apply, you can acquire education, but how to make education accessible to everyone is the question that every nation is looking at. Okay, and there is also a disparity between a male and female literacy rates. uh, uh, so literacy rates between male and female are very different, as you also know. In your country also there is a disparity between the male and female literacy rates, huh? So 2011 population, when I will speak about India, I will I will discuss with you about what are the literacy rates for male and what are the literacy rates for female. So you see there is a disparity between male and female literacy in almost all countries. Though literacy rate is going up, it is not that literacy rate is not going up. It is going up, but still there are differences between two literacy rates. It's not growing up very बहुत अधिका rate रे grow होनी, but it's growing up steadily. You find growth ସବୁଠି ହଉଛି. We are not saying that growth ହଉନି ଜମା, growth ହଉଛି, but as sociologists, as students of sociology, we should look at how, where, you all should ask questions as if କୋଉଠି growth ହଉଛି, କେମିତି ହଉଛି, କାହାକୁ affect କରୁଛି, କାହାକୁ କାହାକୁ help କରୁଛି, କାହାକୁ help କରୁନି. So you should all come up with these kind of questions ki mane it is economy students will basically teach about this numbers, they play with numbers. But as sociologists, we are not concerned much with numbers, but we are concerned with how and where and what. We all ask questions ki kette literacy बढ़ुची, कोठी बढ़ुची, को लोक माने actually literate होउचंती, को माने हेई पारु नांती, जदी हेई पारु नांती, काहे की हेई पारु नांती, कोन तांकर educational background, कोन तांकर background रहुची, काहे educationally literate से माने हेई पारु नांती. तो हमर एई सब questions को नै की we are focusing more on these kind of questions. So sabu questions, sabu year they are tackled to this is difficult to tackle. Simply saying that amar literacy rate padhuchi, amar sabu padhuchi is very different, and to tackle these kind of things is much more a difficult task. Okay, so it also has a madrasa system, because after the British rule, Bangladesh came under the Pakistani regime as the state of East Pakistan. Okay, so during the Pakistani era, along with Bengali, Urdu also became a medium of instruction. So Urdu also became a medium of instruction. So Bangladesh independence paila 1971 re. Okay, so it also has a madrasa system. Madrasa system sabu jani thibo is basically a system in which Urdu medium jo manakara semane madrasa system re educated huanti, and it's a very different kind of system. Madrasa re jo mane padhanti kuha jaye ki they are very intelligent and smart, because semane mane tame kahile semane suni ki seta ye karanti. Okay, so madrasa system achi Bangladesh re. The largest university is the University of Dhaka. Okay, other universities are there in different parts. There is also Open University in Dhaka. So all these kind of things is coming up in Bangladesh. There are a lot of issues like this, but in Bangladesh the literacy rate is low, and there is significant disparity between male and female literacy. So, and there is also, expansion is taking place. It's not that expansion is not taking place. The University of Dhaka is the nation's largest university. Dhaka is the home of Jahangirnagar University. There are a lot of universities in Dhaka in terms of higher education, to attend higher education. Okay. Then we come to the country of Bhutan. Bhutan is one of the smallest and the least developed countries. The main sectors are agriculture and forestry. Main sectors of the economy are agriculture and forestry. Industrial sector is backward. Okay. So industry kahinki develop kari pareni, because it also have, because of your geographical location, because of your agriculture forestry besi Bhutan re, but industrial sector is very backward, and one of the important sectors which contribute to their economy is tourism. Okay, so modern educational programs are underway. Kichi जेहेतु लीस्ट इट इज अ वेरी वन ऑफ द इम्पोर्टेंट वन ऑफ द लीस्ट डेवलप कंट्रीज, तो तांकर एजुकेशनल ये भी आगु बहुत बैकवर्ड थिला, बट नाउ it is modern educational programs are also being taken up. So efforts, there are also efforts to make secondary education relevant. Secondary education relevant करिया पाई की किछि effort भी निया होची, like introduction of skill training programs, career counseling. So career counseling माने everyone is a thing which everyone should समस्त जानी थी वो career counseling कौन, because सब आमो country रे career counseling program बहुत हुए, हाँ कि नहीं, skill training program हुए, career counseling देखो माने गोटे जिंस होची तमे एजुकेशन पाई कि कोन करिवो, how is secondary education relevant केमती हबो लोकन को पाई. So you have to have your basic training skills, you have to have career counseling program, education पाई कि लोको कौन करिवे. So you should actually know what you are trying, what you are doing. So these things are being taken up is in a way, so that so to make secondary education relevant. तो गोटे जिंस होची जहार पैसा अच्छी से हाँ पाठ पढ़िला, he can land up somewhere else, but जहार माने टिके भी disadvantage section जदि माने, then what will you should also know what education will provide you. Okay, so you have this counseling clubs, then you have clubs also to join. तमे बहुत गुडे club, you also in your universities, in your college days, you must be having a lot of clubs in which you are part. से club रे रही कि ना तमे बहुत गुडे activities करी थिबो, so you can also relate to this. आउ गोटे भूटान रे one of the important educational ये is your monastic education. Monasteries तमे जानिच भूटान रे monasteries बहुत important role play करे. हाँ, so monastic education was provided before modern education. Monastic education एबे भी बहुत relevant, monastic education एबे भी provide होची, but modern education पाई की बहुत गुडे steps निया होची, because जेहेतु आमे आमो country भी किते develop कलानी, when आमे Vedic period रे जहा was the situation in education after independence. In the 21st century, you find education growing by leaps and bounds. एबे मु घरे बसी की मु तमनकु माने I am delivering a lecture, so तमे भी माने सब घरे बसी की you are listening to what I am saying. So technology education re, the instill, the technology that we instill in education is also one of the changes that we are seeing in education. Okay, so our education changes jota that also comes from these kind of changes that we are seeing, technological advancement in education. Okay, so specifically ICT in school curriculum. So information communication technology. Okay, all these technologies we are adopting in school curriculum. In Bhutan, they are adopting ICTs in school curriculum also. So this has also shown an improvement in terms of education. educational improvement, education improvement in terms of it has also, jehetu numbers, figures, the government is trying to make education better than, we are always in a situation which is developed than previous jo aguru jo stage guda ko ame deiki asichu, obviously ame ebe better stage re achu education re ye kahiya ku gale. So then we will discuss about India. So India according to the 2011 census, okay, literacy rate is 74.04%. okay, so आमे देखिया तुमको मु कहूतली सब जेंडर डिस्पैरिटी केते मेन एंड वुमेन रो, तो मेन लिटरेसी इज 82.14% एंड वुमेन 65.46%. सो एठु तुम माने जानी परुथबो कि हाउ व्हाट जेंडर डिस्पैरिटी केमिति आम इंडियन ये रे अछि. So this is the latest figure 2011 census, from the 2011 census I'm providing. Okay, so what India kon actually, what is the economy? Modern agriculture, handicrafts, industry, services. सबुठु important economical ये होची, there is a growth of service sector. Okay, but many people are engaged in agriculture. Though many people are more people are engaged in agriculture, but service sector is growing in a faster rate. That we can conclude that agriculture share in the GDP is coming down. Okay, so बेसी लोक एग्रीकल्चर रे ये हेले, बट एग्रीकल्चर एते प्रॉफिटेबल ऑक्युपेशन आजिकली नुह. मेनी पीपल आर शिफ्टिंग फ्रॉम एग्रीकल्चर टू सर्विस सेक्टर हैला. तो दिस इज वन ऑफ द इकोनॉमिकल, one of the basis of your, we can say that Indian economy revolves around this. And as we are concerned about education in India, so we will discuss about what education India has achieved. India has achieved phenomenal education development since independence. Okay, its expenditure on education has increased. Okay, the national goals of universal elementary education, there is but the achievement of universal education, universal elementary education आओ होची जो total eradication of literacy, illiteracy, सेटा तो है ही पारिनी. Obviously there are loopholes. जेहेतु आमर educational development is phenomenal since independence, but आमर फिर भी आमे we are lagging behind because eradication of illiteracy तो आमर country रे is still a distant dream हैला. एपर्यंत हेइनी कि सेटा माने हेइ पारिबो कि नाही is a lot of question mark. So, but one thing that is happened in India is, a good thing that has happened in India is the gross enrollment ratio has increased. The gross enrollment ratio increase, the rate of increase in gross enrollment ratio for girls has been higher than that of the boys. Okay, so gross enrollment ratio has increased. तुमको मु आगुरु कहितली enrollment increase होउची because there are a lot of programs also that are coming up. माने government बहुत गुडे education for all, to free and compulsory education to all, provision of free and compulsory education to all. हाँ, सेही सब ये रे जो government रो जो माने आसुची सबुतिक programs, policies of the government, it for this reason education, the gross enrollment ratio of education has increased. In India, literacy rate has also increased. Okay, literacy rate has increased, rates of dropout has decreased, dropout rate has decreased. So and then low literacy for a woman. Then you have low literacy for women. Growth of literacy, growth of female literacy was No, women still are in a backward position, as there is low literacy for women, which impacts the country there. And then aste aste kon hochi, there is a growth of educational institutions. It is not that only see, there are two kind of things ame kari pariba. Ago infrastructure to thile education habo na, ମାନେ ଇନଫ୍ରାଷ୍ଟ୍ରକ୍ଚର ହେଲେ ତ ହିଁ ଏଜୁକେଶନାଲ ଆଡଭାଣ୍ଟେଜେସ୍ ହବ ନା। ତ ଇନଫ୍ରାଷ୍ଟ୍ରକ୍ଚର ବି ଆସୁଛି, ଗ୍ରୋଥ ଅଫ ଇନଫ୍ରାଷ୍ଟ୍ରକ୍ଚର ଇନ ଦ ସେନ୍ସ ଅଫ ଏଜୁକେଶନାଲ ଇନଷ୍ଟିଟ୍ୟୁସନ୍ସ, institution, primary institution, secondary, then colleges, then higher education institutions, both ebe educational institutions gudako both establish hochi. So this is also one of the steps to growth of education. So you have steps towards education for all. There are a lot of steps taken for the education of all. Then various programs of the government also are important. Indian context re government ro program guda bahut important. When you talk about the like the national program for education of girls at elementary level, education guarantee scheme and alternative for alternative and innovation education, then DPEP, district primary education program. So when you look at this, there are a lot of educational so one of the important educational program is your SSA, okay, Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. Oh, you must be very aware of these SSA, of the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. It is a time bound mission with the objective of ensuring universalization of elementary education and bridging the gender and social gaps by the year 2010. Okay, so you all have these kind of government policies, like I have all discussed about, and that also you will find in your handout the details regarding this the DPEP program. These all are important programs that you should understand, that what, how it is kemiti ei program gudako kemiti enrollment बढ़ेबो, केमती पिला को केमती जेते अधिका access देई परिबो education को. Okay, so a program through re we can say that amaro education बढ़ेबा पई पिला माने आम country रे government is trying, because through these programs, policies, through the establishment of educational institutions. Okay, so literacy aste aste बढ़ुची. तो Indian scenario is कहिया को गले बहुत better नुहा, but फिर भी it is better than the previous scenarios. So then we have Maldives. Maldives जानिचा माने Maldives जो माने actually tourism भल पाओ, जो माने बाहर को actually जिबा को भल पाओ, they are very much adept with the country like Maldives. बहुत माने देखिया को गले पानी चारियाडे, it's a very beautiful country. So तांकरो tourism industry बहुत ये, तो तांकरो fishing, then small role of agriculture or manufacturing एते लाही, because there is a limited amount of cultivable land cultivation बहुत कम, because तांकर cultivable land ही नहीं. तमे देखुचो सबुआडे Maldives देखेलो सबुआडे बाली. Okay, and then you also have this boat building activity, garment production, handicrafts, एगुड़ा भी बहुत माने Maldives रो ये रे बहुत माने प्रभाव पकाए बहुत तांकर इकोनॉमी रे. So as the recent adult literacy rate is 98.61%. You can see that the literacy rate of Maldives is too high. Okay, as compared to India and as compared to any other country, Maldives ro literacy rate बहुत high. And सबुठु interesting जिनसा होची तांकर female literacy rate is more than the male literacy rate. जोड़ा कि तमे केबे भी बहुत countries, बहुत कम countries रे एटा देखिया को मिले कि how can you say that गोटे country रे male literacy rate, female literacy rate to कम. କିନ୍ତୁ Maldives ରେ ଏଇଟା ହିଁ possible, because female literacy rate ହଉଛି 98.69% and male literacy rate is 98.52%. So various higher education institution bhi achi. Department of Higher Education and Training is responsible for facilitating the growth of higher education and training, and it also provides various policy and logistical guidance to different sectors in Maldives. So Maldives ra eta hi ye, you can say that education institutions achi, and then also there has been efforts by the government to improve the education scenario. Okay, what else is there? So higher education is provided by the Maldives College of Higher Education, College of Islamic Studies, and the Center for Continuing Education. Okay. So many students pursue higher education and training overseas also. The Department of Higher Education and Training is the government agency which is responsible for facilitating growth of higher education and training to the students of in the country like Maldives. So then you have Nepal. Okay, so Nepal is the poorest and the least developed in the world. Nepal is one of the poorest and the least developed countries of the world. Agriculture is the mainstay of the economy. It provides livelihood to over 80% of the population. So, agriculture बहुत important in country रे, then population. So industrial activity mainly involves the processing of agricultural production like jute, sugarcane, tobacco. Small size of the economy, ତାଙ୍କର size of the economy is very small. ତାପରେ technologically ସେମାନେ ବହୁତ backward. ତମେ ଜାଣିଥିବ ମାନେ ତାଙ୍କର geography ଦେଖିକି you can say that ତାଙ୍କର remote, ଆମର country ରେ କେତେ remote ଜାଗା ଅଛି. So remote ଜାଗା ଗୁଡାକ ବହୁତ remote, ମାନେ ସେଇଟା ହିଁ one of the important reasons to say that ବହୁତ ଲୋକ access पाई पारुनांती education को. आमे online कथा होचे, आमे online ये करूचे, but many people are not able to get that facility because ସେମାନେ बहुत remote location रे रहुचंती. So technological backwardness, remoteness, तापर तांकर landlock, तांकर geographical location भी बहुत matter करूचे कि केमती तांकर educational growth होची. So it is a landlocked geographical region. So our country तो is not landlocked. Our country is, you have open seas which is there in your coast. It is not a landlocked country. Landlocked, sabbu side ru closed. Okay, you don't have access to the your sea, your ocean. So amo India re we cannot say that we don't have access to, because amaro, and also ଆମର country ବହୁତ landlocked ନ ହେଇଥିଲେ ବି ଅନ୍ୟ ଜିନିଷର ବହୁତ problematic, because cyclone ଆମର ସବୁବେଳେ ଆସୁଛି କି we are also getting something from these seas because of our our closeness to the sea. ଆମ state ତ ଛାଡ, ଆମ state is always rocked by these cyclones and all. So you have geographical location बहुत matter करे, size of the economy केमती तमरो हबो. तो नेपाल भी बहुत vulnerable to natural disasters. बेसी सेठी कौन हुए, earthquake हुए. ओके, सो नेपाल रे बेसी earthquake हुए. तमे को जिंसो माने को जागा तमे जानिच, गोटे prone to earthquake, गोटे prone to cyclone, गोटे prone to drought. माने तमे देखिथिबो बहुत गरम हेले केमती लाटूर गोटे जागा अछि महाराष्ट्र रे, तमे जानिथिबो सेटा माने न्यूज देखिले तमे जानिबो कि केमती माने पूरा माने एते पानी शॉर्टेज हे जाइतला सेठी कि लोक माने पानी पाउ नथिले. तापरे हमरो स्टेट होची बहुत माने साइक्लोन प्रोन, सबु वर्ष साइक्लोन. एबे तमे अम्फान पाइचो, you have just seen how Amphan has destroyed West Bengal and Odisha. So the literacy rate is in Nepal is 67.9%. Nepal has formulated its priorities towards achievement of its target, education for all. It has also, country has also spent some portion toward of its GDP towards education. Adult literacy rate was 44% in 2003. The duration of education was 5 years for completing the primary level and 7 years for secondary level. Sir, I'm audible? Am I audible, sir?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Okay. So, so Nepal has formulated its priorities towards achievements of its targets, education for all. So education or for all is a target for each and every country, because सब country चाहती कि केमिति लोकों को सब country सब पिला मानको education देई पारिबे, how केते हमें access बढ़ेई पारिबा. So Nepal is also trying to, you know, make people access to education. So to eradicate tankar education for all re, priorities hochi to eradicate illiteracy, then to expand the national literacy campaign, to reduce gap between male and female literacy. Okay, so these are the priorities to ensure to provide basic education, then special literary class for prisoners in the jail. Okay, so this is also important when you look at, tankar priority be jodi jail re they can take literacy classes for prisoners, then that will be a very welcome thing. That is a very welcome move. Okay, so the emphasis on gender sensitivity in literary classes. So you have all these kinds of, educational prerogatives when you discuss about different countries. Then then we come to Pakistan. Okay, so Pakistan is a country which is already always there in your news in your country, huh? So Pakistan is an underdeveloped country and has low level of foreign investment. Very low level of foreign investment. The government of Pakistan has made many reforms during the last years to address this issue of, education, address many issues. The country recently faces a lot of challenges in education, particularly rural female inadequate access, high dropout rate, then teacher absenteeism. Teacher absenteeism eguda to sabu chalibo, mane high dropout rate, that you always come, but teacher absenteeism is also one of the important, bahut gude remote location re you also find teacher absenteeism. Okay, shortage of trained and qualified teachers, poor management, infrastructural problem bhi achi. Okay, lack of physical facilities, low operating budget. Budget bhi बहुत important तमरो education रे केते budget actually तमरे education को दौच ता ऊपर depend करूची केते माने तमे educational achievement केते तमरो रहउची. तो political interference भी रहउची. Okay, so एई सब challenges गुडा को बहुत रहउची तमरो भी माने in each and every country there is always a political interference, huh? So that also is a, challenge, a major challenge the country is facing. Then you have literacy rate around 59%. Women are worse. Okay, they are less than 47% women are literate, as compared to a country like Maldives. What do you find here? You find that women are faring in a, not faring in a better way when we compare their educational achievement to men. But the overall literacy rate is also very low in Pakistan. Okay, then we come to Sri Lanka. Sri Lankan economy revolves, another thing I want to point out that in Pakistan, the prime objectives of education sector reforms, there are various, education reforms that have been taken up, like universalization of primary education, mainstreaming madrasa education to diversify employment opportunities, strengthening the quality of education through better teachers, improving the relevance of education. So these kind of things you will find in each, each economy, each country. They are taking up certain steps to address the educational problem. Okay, so you also, but you need to understand that which country is taking what initiative. Okay, some countries like India is taking up educational, their aim is very different from a country like Pakistan. So in your handout that is given to you, there is, it's very clearly mentioned that only problem is you have to find out, the according to 2011 census, you also should find out some data regarding the 2011 census. Okay, so how much I have shared a lot with you, like in some countries I have shared the recent data of what is the literacy rate, what is the literacy rate of male female. So you also need to take up this exercise when you because it's when you write somewhere, you write something in your exam, and then you have to quote the recent the recent census, rather than saying that this happened in 2003, this happened in 2004. So you should record the recent census data. Yeah, but it's fine, but it is not important to quote the census, but it's also important to understand things. So it's better if you understand and then write. Then Sri Lanka, you have the economy revolves on food processing, textile, food and beverages, telecommunication, insurance and banking. Okay, the GDP grew at an average annual growth rate of 5.5% in the early 1990s. Okay, the present educational system in Sri Lanka derived from the British educational system, which was introduced by the British colonial masters in the 19th century. The literacy rate stands at 96.3%. So you also see that this is also a very literate country in terms of educational their advantages. So the government also, as you have priorities for every government. In Sri Lanka also, the government has a lot of priorities to provide compulsory education to children, then to provide educational opportunities. Okay, so an overview of the educational system in the SAARC countries, to give you an overview, is so these countries have given you an idea of the educational developments and the efforts that are taken up by the government to address the educational problems that are there in the SAARC countries. But despite the efforts in attending, माने तुमको मु जो कहली कि बहुत गुडे कंट्रीज रो बहुत गुडे माने अच्छी कोन प्रायोरिटीज, गवर्नमेंट प्रायोरिटीज इन एजुकेशन तमे देखिबो. If you compare all the countries, you see that they converge on most of the things. तो सबू मोस्ट ऑफ द कंट्रीज रे तमे पाइबो टू प्रोवाइड कंपलसरी एजुकेशन थिबो, टू प्रोवाइड एजुकेशनल अपॉर्चुनिटीज थिबो, टू इंक्रीज एक्सेस थिबो. तो in a way we can say that सबू countries अलगा अलगा educational priorities तांकरो, but when we compare all these countries, we find that it boils down to 2-3 things which each country says. किछि किछि जिंसो माने will be very similar to each and every country. So ame eya शिक्षा माने from this unit, as this unit is covered, this unit basically talks about how the educational reforms are being taken up in different countries. But despite their efforts, issues like poverty, women education, dropout, scarcity of funds, it still exists. It is not that these things are eradicated. This still exists, and this is the thing which is being a challenge, bringing a challenge to the educational attainment. And one thing is the rate of unemployment. Okay, educational problem also leads to a problem in employment. You also have a huge unemployment rate. So the issue of unemployment also raises concern about the current pattern of economic growth and trade. Okay, so बहुत माने जेहेतु बहुत आगौची आम कंट्री आमे कहिबा ऑल द कंट्रीज आर बहुत गुडे मेजर्स नौचंदी एजुकेशन को ये करे को, बट बहुत प्रॉब्लम्स रही जाउची जोड़ा कि बहुत माने माने ताकू एड्रेस करबा इज बहुत डिफिकल्ट. ओके, तापरे चिल्ड्रन एजुकेशन भी गोटे जिंसो सेटा कि बहुत माने important role play करूची labor problems, child labor problems both Asian countries रे रहूची. So in order to address all these things, आउ भी बहुत जिनस गवर्नमेंट नौची, therefore open and distant learning system भी बहुत माने ये करिची through open universities, then open schools, distance mode of learning, एगुड़ा भी सब आणुची. माने also taking up a lot of, as a country is also taking up a lot of virtual university केते create होची. तमे केते university, केते kind of university देखुचो. One kind of university is also a virtual university that Maldives is going to being set up in Maldives for small states of the Commonwealth. So तो बहुत गुड़े virtual universities. So the proposed university would based on the collaboration of a consortium of existing education providers. So many people, many countries are taking up many initiatives to address these educational problems, but the problem is the problem still continues. Mane problem continue karuchi. Au mane there is still a lot of ama bahut agu kauri jibar achi. It's not that the situation is solved. Kana bahut gode problem, poverty both exist karuchi. Okay, so this brings to an unit end of the unit 15. Then we'll start the unit 16. I'll be briefly speaking about different countries. So as I said that this is a Asia, tamara jo SAARC countries kote geopolitical region, samti tame dekhiya gole Europe re bhi bahut countries achi. Okay, they also constitute one geographical area, gote geographical unit tame kahi paribo, but there are a lot of diversities within that. But so Europe is the sixth largest continent and has 46 countries, assorted dependencies and territories. There are a lot of it constitutes a lot of countries together. So in enacting geographical definition, Europe is really not a continent but a part of a peninsula of Eurasia, which includes all of Europe and Asia. Some जो टर्की, रशियन फेडरेशन, किछि कंट्रीज अछि जोडा बोथ एशिया और यूरोप रे कहि परिबो तमे. इट्स नॉट दैट सेइंग दैट समन खाली यूरोप रे कि समन खाली एशिया रे. सो एडा होछि टिके जियोग्राफिकल आइडेंटिफिकेशन ऑफ. सो एजुकेशन इन यूरोप, विल कम टू एजुकेशन इन यूरोप. एजुकेशन तो प्राइमरी, सेकेंडरी, टर्शियरी सबु एजुकेशन. प्राइमरी एजुकेशन इन यूरोप हैज बोथ डीप रूट्स एंड सी the problem with Europe is its diversity. Okay, तो आमो country रे जेमती की बहुत diverse, and the European countries are also very diverse in the sense. Okay, तो तांकर education has always tried to address this diversity. Educational तांकर जहाँ भी educational ये से माने करूचंती will always address these diversities. So this reflected the principle that particular character of education in the should be fully respectful code. Interaction between education, training and employment systems could be improved. Kemti education, training or employment, always education, training or employment systems kemiti interact haba o kemti seoda improve kariba. So all countries emphasize the crucial importance of developing skills, skill development, tapre knowledge based economy, tapre economic competitiveness. ए गुड़ा को भी बहुत important role play करूची in the when you talk about the primary and secondary education in a country like Europe. So they crucial importance of developing skills which is needed for a knowledge based economy and for economic competitiveness. So in relation to social inclusion, all countries indicate that access and employability of the target groups at the defining components. So access kote jinso which is excuse me, access kote jinso is you can say that it is not a thing which is just taken up by the SAARC and the countries which are underdeveloped, but the developed countries in Europe are also trying to make students make education accessible to everyone. Okay, it's not that ki only this access, this word access has a lot of एई पाई की ही बहुत problems, एई पाई की बहुत politics, एई पाई की ही बहुत जिनसो revolves around this. You know, as sociologists, we are very much fond of this word called access. Access and employability of target group. They also try for employability of the target groups. So most of the countries highlight that in their education and training policies, economic and social objectives are mutually supportive. So तमे कोन भाबुछ एतरे एम्प्लॉयमेंट को से माने बेसी इंपोर्टेंस दोचंदी. एम्प्लॉयमेंट ता सबु बेले तांकर one of the important agenda. So economic both माने social आउ economic, economic in the sense of employment opportunities, employment, and okay, so social and mutual, employment and the social objective of education should be mutually supportive. It's not that one can go without the other, but both will go together. So this is the important thing you can say about the European countries, the education system of the European countries. So nearly 20. So you have in countries, in some countries, vocational educational training is also provided. So for example, in countries like Australia, Czech Republic, Denmark, Finland, owing to such factors, have a dual system. So alternative education, alternative training, double qualification. So these also are important, things which, very different from what, your education system will say. So these are the important pointers that you should understand when you talk about the educational scenario. You are not going to explain each and everything that you read, but some of the important points which come up, so that you need to understand. Kemiti tanko education scenario is different. What are the important constituents of that education system? So this is the overall education scenario, the overall, the primary and secondary education scenario. So then we come to the tertiary education. So tertiary education plays a central role in the development of both human beings and modern societies, as it enhances social, cultural, and economic development, active citizenship, ethical values. Okay, so ethical values, citizenship, economic development, sabu important when you talk about a tertiary education. At European level, education in general and higher education in particular are not subjects of common European policy. 1 second. Yeah, so the education in general and higher education in particular are not subjects of a common European policy. However, according to Article 149 of Treaty of Amsterdam, the community shall contribute to the development of quality education. Community also, okay, by encouraging cooperation between member states, though a wide range of actions such as promoting the mobility of citizens, designing joint study programs, establishing networks, exchanging information, or teaching languages of the European Union. Okay, so there are different, we can see that there are different educational policies, and it also, targets certain actions, okay, for enabling education, education to people. Thus, the community has a complementary role to play. Here, the community plays an important role to add a European dimension to education, to help to develop quality education, and to encourage lifelong learning. Okay, the important role of the community. So the main tool for putting, so one of their important uh, practice is the Socrates program, okay, which contains an action specifically focused on higher education. Oh, Socrates program, okay, that you should uh, so that you should actually understand that what is the Socrates program. And then it supports, this Socrates program supports and encourages exchange of students, teachers, the launching of joint study program or intensive courses, the pan-European thematic networks, and other measures aiming at the development of a European dimension of higher education. So you see that there are different dimensions of education. In when you discuss about the SARC nations, then the educational prerogatives are different when you talk about the European dimension of education. They have different programs. It's a exchange of students and teachers, and then there's a lot of joint study program, intensive courses, then thematic. These are all important things which distinguish your educational prerogatives with theirs. Okay, so as we discussed in SARC, the education in different countries, so in education in different European countries will be also very different. So we have taken into account different educational countries, different European countries like Belgium, Bulgaria, Czech Republic, Germany, and then you have Hungary, Portugal, UK, then, and the funding of education in Europe, how it happens. Then some of the education in the northeastern Europe is also one of the important parts that we'll be discussing. So Belgium, the education of Belgium was being offered for 3 different communities: the French, German, and the Dutch speaking communities. So you see that there's a lot of diversity within these countries. So there are a lot of innovations that is coming up. So innovation was presented because of achieving a democratization of education with an aim to make access, and even general academic education easier for the less favored children. Here you see access. That access has been following us from the very beginning. So it is also evident in the European scenario about how access to higher education can be done. Okay, when Belgium, the law, higher education acknowledge, there are various state universities and state universities, free universities that are coming up because of these educational laws that have been taken up by different countries. So, and in the case of Bulgaria, the Bulgarian education system has a rich history. What is important is their rich historical setting in the country of Bulgaria. The Bulgarian people have established and preserved deep-seated educational traditions. Their educational traditions are, very much deep-rooted. Okay, as we also find in Indian educational system, we have deep-rooted educational systems like we find in, the various universities. So the universities that existed then, Taxila and all those. So we also have deep-seated, deep-rooted educational traditions. It's not that it's just, everything you can understand is from their history. You understand something when you relate it to history. It is not that you are, understanding something like that, but it has to be rooted in history. You have to look at the context in which that evolved. Your context will be very different from someone else's context, but the context in which these things evolved is important. Okay, so you cannot say that something evolved overnight. Nothing evolves. Everything has some system, some context, some history, and then you can say that sabu evolve kala through these. But ସବୁ ଜିନିଷର historical context is the most important. तो ସେଇ historical context को ନେଇକି ଦେଖ ମୁଁ ତମକୁ first କହିଥିଲି କି geographically location, your climate also differs. Context केमिति build हबो, को economy कोठी build हबो, it depends on where the country is situated. It depends on your geographical, it depends on your climatic system in which the country is located. So this is also true of every other country. So here also you find that the Bulgarian people have preserved their love for learning and education. So there are cell schools. Okay. So you also find something very interesting here, cell schools, which were either monastic schools or public schools. The monastic schools where where the nature was, it predominantly religious education was being, given to people. Public schools provided people with secular knowledge. So it's very religious, and then this is secular. So you have either monastic schools or public schools. Then public school also were established on a larger scale at the end of 18th century, and then they were known as the new Bulgarian schools. So these all are the educational reforms. When you talk about these countries, these are the educational reforms. Then there are also educational changes that are coming up. Okay, this educational yes, the new Education Act was adopted in 1991, and then Bulgarian legislature underwent serious changes through this act. Okay, so as you know that there are different acts in different countries, different acts are there. तापरे act आसिले ही तापरे तो system change हबो ना. तो when something becomes an act, then only it can be adopted, and then it can be population will be then forced to do something because something is mentioned in some act. So the higher education in Bulgaria originated in the late 19th century after the liberation of Bulgaria from Ottoman yoke in order to satisfy the cultural, economic and political necessities of the young state. So liberation. So it was also liberated. The first Bulgarian university was opened in Sofia with priorities in supplying legal system, state administration and the schools with qualified specialists. Okay, so these are the educational changes that are being taken up in the state, in the country. Then Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia, okay, was established in 1918. Since then, one major issue was the creation of a universal education system. It wanted to create a universal, major issue to tackle was the creation of universal education system, bringing into line the cultural standard of three different parts of the country, Czech land, Slovakia, Ukraine. Okay. So Czech Republic higher education, dates back to 600 years. So there are a lot of changes, till now. How it is now, in 1938, a university is established, and now it's called the Charles University. So these are very, things which are rooted. Their education, modern education, is rooted in all this historical achievement that the country has offered. So with the foundation, then we come to Germany. So with the foundation of the German Democratic Republic, the German Central Administration for National Education was transformed into the Ministry of National Education, which was responsible for the schools and institution of higher education. So there were reorganization of the school system. So higher education evolved under completely different conditions. So here you find our Marx and our Lenin. When you talk about Germany, you are very, you always feel that we are sociologically connected because you always find a Marxist and Leninist approach to everything. And when Germany comes into the picture, you first thing you think about is Marx. So It was based on a unitary, their higher education was completely different, in which it was based on a unitary and centrally controlled concept in the service of Marxist Leninist party ideology and committed to serving the ends of a planned economy. Okay, ends means supplying cadres to a planned economy. Then there are various reforms were taken up in higher education in Germany as well. Okay, then one minute. Okay, then there are educational reforms in the educational system in Hungary also. Then the issue of democratizing public education system was also taken up in Hungary. Then the most important of this organization was to create the publicity of Hungarian higher education abroad. Okay, see, this is also one of the thing is publicity. Both mane आजिकली बहुत माने when you relate it to many things around you, तमे भाबुचो कि तमे बहुत जिनस publicity पाई कि करूचो. Okay, the whole media hype that is happening, the whole media discourse that is being built is because of this, is because of publicity. केते को जिनस publicity हेई परिवो तमे काहाकू गोटे माने कोविड टाइम रे कि पैंडेमिक टाइम रे तमे काहाकू गोटे कोन हेल्प कलो दैट हैज टू बी पब्लिसाइज्ड. अदरवाइज किछि करूनो माने हाउ विल पीपल नो दैट यू आर publicizing something. तमे केमती मीडिया ग्लेयर को केमती आसीबो. सो यू आर ऑलवेज publicizing something. हां, किछि गोटे छोटो काम करी कि केमती we will put it in Facebook, which will put it in virtual media, so that our friends will see it and like and share. So this kind of there are also simultaneously many educational reforms that were taken up in Portugal, UK. There are different, these countries will take up different educational prerogatives, different educational reforms in different ways. Okay, so that, see, the new education in Portugal, the new Education Act approved by the Parliament contained Lisbon strategy guideline and the underlining principle of Bologna Declaration. Those who are, those which needs to be highlighted at the alteration of the access system for higher education. You see, again, access is coming. So you find that this is a, this connects all the countries around the world. Okay, the strengthening of the principle of equality. Then growth of quality in education, research and experimentation. Yes, the quality in education, research in education is one of the important elements which is coming up in a bigger way. Ajikali research upre bahut focus diya jauchi. Research universities, there are a lot of focus is given to research in education. Unless and until you do a research in your own area, how will you, ageva kemti? So you will be confined to a particular location unless and until you take up research in something. So, so there is a demand for, quality in education, research and experimentation. So these all are the reorganization of higher education system by the achievement of. So there are certain declarations in which different reorganization of higher education committee, how it would be taken up, is also mentioned. Okay, so you also have UK also, in Northern Ireland there was no statutory requirement for the provision of nursery education. However, government initiatives set targets to provide additional funded part-time preschool places in range of settings. So government takes up a lot of provisions, a lot of initiatives, so that educational it will bring around a change in your educational scenario. So England and Wales, the main aim of these strategies were to raise the quality of care and to make child care more affordable and accessible by increasing places and improving information. So child care केमती affordable हबो केमती accessible हबो तो child care is also one of the important things you must say because ଆମର କଣ crèche ସବୁ start ହଉଛି people are working parents are putting their children there so child care केमती child many women are also leaving jobs for taking care of their children so child care is also important constituent केमती ଆମର भी kindergarten school nurseries ନାଇଁ ବହୁତ ଗୁଡେ educational reforms ଆସୁଛି ବହୁତ ଗୁଡେ ତମେ ଦେଖିବ kindergarten ଗୋଟେ ଛୋଟ ଛୁଆକୁ ଏନା play school କୁ ପଠେଇବ ବହୁତ ବର୍ଷ ତଳେ play school ର concept ନଥିଲା ଯେତେବେଳେ ମାନେ ତମର our parents were never they were never aware of this play school and all everything was taken up in homes ଘରେ ନିଆ ଯାଉଥିଲା ସବୁ ଏ ସବୁ care but ଏବେ play school ର concept ଆସିଲାଣି ତ play school ରେ କେମିତି educational ଇଏଟା କେମିତି ମାନେ how ଏଇ ସବୁ ଜିନିଷ ବି child care education and child care is a very important thing that ଆଜିକାଲି ଇଏରେ it's a very important strategy how do you strategize your child's education so this is ଆଉ ଆଜିକାଲି ବି ମାନେ child care ବି ଛାଡୁଛନ୍ତି play school ରେ ବି also to actually do their own work so that the child gets engaged in some other work in the play school for gets engaged in some of the other work so that you can also work smoothly at your home so बहुत गुडे ये रे एमती भी होची okay so but that is an important aspect child care जो गुडा को हमें relate बेसी करि पारुछु आम कंट्री को माने जेतळे आमे रिलेट करि पारुछु फॉर जिंसो आम कंट्रीज रे भी ए सब जिंसो रो ये भी निया होची ओके so there are a lot of changes that are taking place in terms of funding of higher education okay the funding of education देखो higher education funding is always debatable हाँ किए केते फंड करिवो किए केते पैसा दबो तो केमिति कोठी केते contribution kahar rahibo so it is always a debatable issue in Europe also the funding has been a very debatable issue in some countries decentralization policies adopted it's not centralization and decentralization tame buji partubo ki your panchayati raj system is a decentralized system ki jo 73rd amendment re joda asila ki power to the panchayats so this is all kinds of decentralizing so in many countries funding still remains a challenge and an obstacle to implementing the modern agenda so funding still remains a challenge but both good reforms niya hochi funding to address kariya pai okay so then we'll come out education in southeastern Europe so although the countries of southeastern Europe have been independent democracies the fall of Soviet Union each had problems transitioning from a centrally planned economic system to a market based economy dekho एठी गोटे important jinso is your market based economy okay when one country is transitioning from one particular mode of economy to another mode of economic production then you will always have that problem amo India re jetale when India got independence and then it was a colony then ame transition kariki तापरे प्लानिंग आसिला तापरे मार्केट आसिला then we are having neoliberalism free market सब so this will always happen when there is a transition from one economy to the other market based economy is also one of the important highlights market आजिकली बहुत the free hand of market so market has always been an important issue in today's year joti market nahi city everything happens on the basis of a market so there are also education changes has been brought about when one there is a transition from one economy to another so south at present the southeastern Europe shows commonality in challenges problems in education so there is a low GDP for education low teacher salaries child poverty overloaded criteria, curricula. Okay, so these also are important, problems which Southeastern Europe is facing. Especially the Balkan region of the Southeastern Europe is one of the world's most complex areas in terms of ethnicity, language, and religion. So, this is, then we come to the end of the unit 17, sorry, unit 16. Then we'll go to unit 17. Unit 17 basically talks about the educational expansion and growth in India. Okay, so I have not prepared a for this, but yes, we will manage in 1-2 slides only. I will explain you more things. So as you said that our educational system also has historical roots. So starting from the Vedic period, we shall trace the educational system. In this chapter, we will trace the growth of education system through the Buddhist period, the Mughal period, the British period, and then we will reach at the post-independence period. Thus, when we shall study the under the growth of education, the inception of formal education, the changes that underwent. It's not that education is same when we started in the Vedic age, but education has also moved on, and become very different from what we had. But one thing is that education has not remained stagnant, but with passing of time, it has also undergone great changes. Okay, so we can say that the education is undergoing transformation or transition, undergoing huge transformation. So Vedic period. First, we'll talk about the Vedic period. The contribution of this area towards the generation of knowledge and emphasis on learning was immense. Here, the emphasis on learning, generation of knowledge was important. So, knowledge generation is a very difficult thing. It's not that what we study through our studies, we are generating knowledge. We are just studying, but we are not gaining that knowledge that is required, that will make us something. It's not that knowledge we are gaining. To gain a knowledge, it's very difficult. So, generation of knowledge and emphasis on learning, okay, is very important in this period. So it's claimed that during the early part of Vedic period, education, so in the early part of Vedic period, you cannot say that education was a prerogative of just the male members. Women also got equal opportunities regarding education. You can also, talk about women scholars like Maitri, Gargi, Lopamudra. Many of you must be having names, relating to the women scholars of this time. I find a lot of Lopamudras, a lot of Gargis, a lot of Maitris. So, as your names have been derived from these women scholars. So maybe, I don't know, I don't know what went on when your name was given, but most of the people I find associated with these kind of names. So education has started, but during the but later on, in the Vedic period itself, early Vedic, yes, women were also getting the education, but then education started acquiring a formal nature. Okay, education, formal nature, formal, education was imparted. Centers of learning started, like gurukuls, ashrams, parishads. Okay, young students were sent from home to the residential school. You know about the gurukuls, the residential schools basically. Education was imparted for years together. Then teacher learning started following an initiation process into the world of education. Education was achieved for salvation, attaining of salvation. The teacher, here the importance of teacher was very much important. Okay, teacher used to be an expert in both theory and practice. So teacher was highly revered for his knowledge. Okay, so knowledge and integrity. So you must be aware of this Guru Dakshina. The Guru Dakshina, so but the gurus or teachers taught not for the sake of money, but they thought that it is their sacred duty. We do actually, we always in this, today's year, we always see that more kon fayda habo. Okay, so what are we going to get in when we teach? But at that point of time, you see that the teachers were always feeling that it's that sacred duty to teach. It is not that to gain money. Okay. Okay, so it was, the teaching is not an was not an occupation but rather a duty. So these important things you need to highlight when you are writing, you are reading and writing about a particular topic. So it is their duty. The students were supposed to be hardworking and refrain from all kind of luxury. So uh, so students were not were supposed to refrain from all kinds of luxury. They were supposed to lead a life of chastity, be humble. Okay, and which is not, you cannot find it these days to be very humble. And everyone is looking at their, because it's a market driven world, right? So it's everyone is looking at their faida, how amra kemti faida habo, how will we gain in this. So the curriculum was also rich, okay, with components such as mathematics, language, grammar. huh? But education was not, during this period, was not for the masses but only for the elites of society. Here you find a brahminical nature orientation of education. Okay, the upper caste, namely kshatriyas and brahmins, were allowed to avail the opportunities of education. Women's education did not receive its share. Women's education was not given that importance, and more importance was given to the Brahmins and Kshatriyas. Upper caste always has an hand to education. And because of this, another important feature is the students were like the members of the teacher's family. And although the concept of Guru Dakshina happened to be there, but knowledge was held to be sacred. Knowledge, duty, importance of teacher. So then rich curriculum, salvation were important, markers in this period. But another important bad thing which happened is it was the prerogative of the Brahmins and Kshatriyas. So then comes the Buddhist period. Why Buddhist period came? Because overwhelming dominance of the Brahmins over the lower castes became responsible. Lower caste became responsible for the lower caste. There were certain disenchantment lower caste were facing. Okay, masses with the prevailing system. Kaingina Brahmin had their upper hand, no, in education. So the lower castes felt that they are not getting the proper education, so they were disenchanted. Okay, became disenchanted with the prevailing system of education. So Gautama Buddha, you must have are very familiar with Gautama Buddha, the religious leader, who as a social reformer also preached. He vouched for a casteless society. So I don't think a casteless society can ever be possible. Many people must be thinking that living in metros and all, dissolves all caste barriers, but that is not true. Even if you find in cities, you find this caste, will never leave you. Whenever this caste feeling and caste superiority and inferiority will always be there with you. So it is very difficult to find a casteless society, but Gautama Buddha actually vouched for a casteless society. So during the period of Buddhist period, education was institutionalized. So you can, these also is a marker. One, I am just, these you can find from your reading also, but जो गुड़ाक important marker मु तुमको से गुड़ाक कहूची, when you write an answer or when you speak to something on something, this has to be there when you talk, when you are talking about the Buddhist period, education in the Buddhist period. Then institutionalization was one of the important um, uh, important achievements in the Buddhist period. The educational institutions of great repute like Nalanda, Taxila, others, these, flourished. You must have heard about the Nalanda system of education. Okay, so during this period, sanghs also came up. Gurukuls, ashrams were substituted by the institutionalized sanghs or monasteries. Okay, so as you find Gurukuls ashram in Vedic period, here you find monasteries. Okay, so Buddhism ro monastery sangare bahut ye tame aguru we have already discussed when we are discussing about Bhutan. So you also find monasteries there. Most are Buddhists. So the number of students in educational, so these institution in these monasteries, so number of students in the educational institutions were quite high. There were thousands of students and teachers. Therefore, Buddhist educational institution had a wide perspective. So you, so this was a step forward from the individualized and exclusive. Gurukuls were very exclusive. They were individualized. They were exclusive. But when you talk about monasteries, they were not exclusive. They had, many students were coming. The Buddhist education, it had a wide perspective. All sections of the society were coming to it. Okay, so different languages were also introduced, like Pali, Prakrit. Okay, so these distinguish one period from the other, the Vedic period and the Buddhist period. So the curriculum followed in the latter period still, but what is important in is that the curriculum that was followed was a continuation of the Vedic period. It was not very something which was very detached from the Vedic period, but it was a continuation of the Vedic period. So education was imparted following the payment of fees by the Sundun, paid service. Okay, so students were supposed to, so it was on the basis of the paid service. This was the beginning of education becoming a paid service. And then in the Buddhist period, the attempt was made to bring about social equity in imparting education. Education of women also did not receive its due importance during this period. Okay, then we come to medieval period. In medieval period, Muslim, this period was, we saw Muslim invasions during this period. There was a lot of political instability. The education system underwent far-reaching changes. You find madrasas. So madrasas, which in Arabic means schools, were the institutions of higher learning. They function even today. There are also many madrasas today, but there were a lot of madrasas at that time. Education was imparted through the madrasas. The maktabs were the Muslim elementary schools that made the students competent to read the religious texts. Then theological considerations also dominated the educational institutions like madrasas and maktabs. Education during this period is said to have an excessive theological bias. Okay, so this was probably due to bias of the rulers who patronized education. There were a lot of rulers who patronized education, and many, the education also, uh, uh, was education flowed from them. So basically, theological considerations was given importance. You must be knowing about what a theological consideration is. It's a study of nature of God, and religious beliefs was given very much importance. Religious beliefs education was based on religious beliefs. So theological considerations was given very much importance in this. There were various poets, scholars, philosophers who were greatly respected and patronized by the rulers. Okay. The credit for organizing education on a systematic basis, here Akbar plays an important role. The Mughal emperor Akbar, uh, credit for organizing education on a systematic basis goes to Akbar. He opened a large number of schools and institutions, higher education, higher learning for Hindus, Muslims, even introduced curricular reforms. So there are many educational expansion, taken up during the Mughal period. So, and then in the British period. So we are very much interested in knowing what educational changes happened in the British period. So in British period, the British period started with the decline of the Mughal Empire in the middle of the 18th century. The missionaries from Europe had already started arriving in India too. So this was the time when Christian missionaries came. Okay. Warren Hastings was the, you must have all learned history a bit when you were in your graduation or something on school. You must have studied history as a subject. So I always say that everything has to be based on something. So we always have something historical base to everything. So you said that Warren Hastings was the first Governor General in India who recognized the duty of the government to provide education to its subjects. So yes, so educational Warren Hastings was the first Governor General who recognized the duty of the government to provide education to its subjects. He founded and also endowed the Calcutta Madrasa, okay, which happened to be the earliest educational institution to be set up by the British rulers. Okay, so then the missionary activities were taken up in a, as you know, the Christian missionaries were responsible for, for establishing institutions, for propagating modern education. So Christian missionaries were, came to India, and then they started their educational activities during the British period. And you also have, reformers like Raja Rammohn Roy. You must have read about Raja Rammohn Roy in your history book. He was in favor of imparting Western education, science education, to liberate the minds of Indians and modernize them. Okay, so and one of the important achievements of the British, when you talk about education, one of the important things you must know is the Macaulay's minutes of minutes. Okay, it was the first step. It laid the foundation of modern education actually. So but it is often blamed because it imposed a Western model of education on the structure of education that had evolved for thousands of years. Macaulay's minutes are more misunderstood than understood, most blamed than accepted. So you can say that though it laid the foundation of modern education, but it was also imposed a Western model of education. So which was very, that is a very, many people blame Macaulay for it. So because of the importance it gave to English education, disregarding Indian science, literature, and other knowledge. Many knowledge, existed in India before. India was a great, system. There was, literature. It was very much. It has a great history of, and literature was very much influential. Literature and other Indian sciences, existing knowledge of the basically the prevailing knowledge was very important. But Macaulay, what minutes had already, given importance to the English Western model of education, English education. So that was very much, you know, mm, Macaulay had argued that the advancement in the field of education made by the West should not be withheld from the natives who are craving for it. So, Indians like, so it also had come with such an advancements. It's not that education system also needs to be advanced. And one of the important ways to advance education system in India was incorporation of English education. So there were many attempts by the in British time to in 1910 G.K. Gokhale mooted the idea of free and compulsory primary education for children all over the country. So then there is a lot of many educational changes came up. Okay, so education in the colonial period was marked differently from which that prevailed in the past. So there were many changes in the educational reform. The literacy rate was low, and then in spite of 200 years of British rule, the literacy rate was very low. This was especially true for the socially and economically backward sections of the society. Then we already have discussed about so many problems that India had: the literacy rate, the dropout rate, and then the level of education. It was very low. So education was also removed from the socio-cultural requirements and was considered more suited to fulfill the demands of a regime that belonged to alien culture. Okay, so then various pragmatic approach towards education was taken up simultaneously. Pragmatic education, there was changes in school curriculum, diversification of education, then concepts like teacher education, mass education, then free and compulsory education, adult education. It also came up in a bigger way. So, and the growth of education in post-independence period. Then we will discuss about the growth of education in the post-independence period. Post-independence period, more importance was given to planning, because planning started post-independence. Everything was done in a planned way. We have 5-year plans, which, so to do things in a planned way, we had introduced planning. So on the basis of planning, we used to various committees and commissions were formed, and then educational enhancement, educational expansion happened in this post independence period. As there were a lot of problems, like as we have already discussed, backward section of the population had faced a lot of problems. So these problems need to be addressed, and the educational system needs to be transformed in a major way, so that it could be the means for transformation of a nation. So transformation of education will ensure the transformation of a nation, because education, if we are educated, you can transform the society. So education is the prime mover of society, you can say. So in order to facilitate the growth, various commissions and committees were established post independence to actually take care of the educational growth. Secondary Education Commission was set up in 1952. And then you have the Kothari Education Commission under the chairmanship of D.S. Kothari, which submitted a report. And then the National Policy on Education in 1968. And then you have a lot of the National Policy on Education was formulated, and to implement it, the program of action was also developed by the Ministry of Human Resource Development. Operation Blackboard was taken up to equip primary schools with basic infrastructural facilities. So these are important commissions, committees, efforts taken up by the government in the post-independence period. So it was also backed by certain constitutional provisions. The Indian Constitution came into force in 1950 when India became a republic. So initially it was a state subject, but following an amendment, it became a concurrent subject, which is shared by both center and the state. Now both can legislate on it. Both center and the state. Uh, but it's always the center which coordinates and monitors the functioning of the states in educational matters. So under the fundamental rights, then came the fundamental rights. First we can start about saying that planning came, and then you also have fundamental rights like right to education. Then it also has been included under the directive principles of state policy. So which required the state to impart free and compulsory elementary education, and now requires the state to provide early child care and education. So these also led to the growth of literacy rates. Gainful employment. Illiteracy was the greatest block in the path of socio-economic development. There was a growth of literacy rates, as you can see from subsequent census operations. So gradually this led to the expansion of education. Okay, so expansion of education, we can say that expansion of education happened in terms of enrollment. In 1951, when the population was just 36 crores, the literacy rate was 18%, which indicates the access to educational opportunities. Here we again are using the term access. So but the educational attainment, the literacy rate has increased by leaps and bounds. And now from that time, when we compare, the educational rates have increased. So there are also expansion of educational facilities. Expansion of educational facilities are there in terms of also educational institutions coming up. Then there is development of women education. Education of women have also increased. And then there is a development of alternative forms of educational institutions. It's not that only educational institutions have come up, but it has also diversified. There are also alternative forms to education, like distance education, non-formal education. So distance education, since the first corresponding course offered by Delhi University in 1962, distance and open learning has covered a long way. Then you find your Indira Gandhi National Open University is also offering distance education. There were open universities. So through this, open learning centers are contributing a lot towards the expansion of education, as they are capable of taking education to the doorstep of those who are aspiring for education, but they cannot join the educational institution physically. So it is taking education to the doorstep of people. So then you have non-formal education, which comprises systematic and organized educational activities that are carried out outside the framework of the formal education system. It mainly intends to serve those who cannot or could not attain educational system, especially the dropouts. Okay, so the dropouts are taken into account when you talk about the non-formal education. So it does provide a need-based education to a particular section of society. So different media are used to provide the non-formal education. Apart from the print medium, electronic media like radio, television, audio, these are also employed to provide a non-formal education to students. So we can say that there is a diversification of education streams also. Okay. So education system has undergone expansion due to the inclusion of higher percentage of student population in comparison to pre-independence era, when educational level was compared to the education level, level of education at the pre-independence era. There's been an expansion in terms of increase in educational facilities. Educational expansion of education has another connotation, diversification. There's a lot of diversification in education that has been taken up. Curriculum included, before the curriculum included only few areas of, such as religious texts, literature, grammar, mathematics. But now there's a lot of things which is included, like systematic study of science and social sciences are also part of the curriculum. Then you also find, following independence, study of the freedom struggle became important following the curriculum of schools. Vocationalization of education are taken up. So due to changing socioeconomic needs and changing outlooks, several new areas of study has been introduced. Various new areas, new disciplines have come up in response to new demands. Okay, so so there are a lot of changes and diversification of education as we find, in India. So education, as I said, is not a static concept. It's a dynamic concept. It's a attainment of education is a process, we can say. It is not, it is always a process which is going on. It's not that we are finding an end to something, but it's a process in which, it is going on. So it has grown in response to the socio-economic demands of the sea. One important thing I told you is the context, the socio-economic demand. The today's demand will not be tomorrow's demand, or tomorrow's demand will not be, the following generation will demand that, they will demand something else. So this also changes according to the socio-economic demands of the day, as well as the philosophy prevailing during a particular period. So study students, there are a lot of transition you can see from the Vedic period to the Buddhist period to the medieval period, and then to the Mughal period, then British period, and then the post-British period, post-independence period. So we have arrived now at a stage in which there is diversification of education. Many educational opportunities are being provided, but there are still many loopholes that need to be addressed. Though we have come a long way in your educational attainments, but there are still many things which needs to be addressed. And then our policy should take care of that. This we come. Am I audible? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. So then I will come to Unit 18. Okay, the constitutional provisions and educational policies in India. So again, see, it is not constitutional provisions, doesn't come like that. It is based on certain guidelines. Okay, the guidelines come from constitutional provisions. There are certain guidelines. It's not that constitutional provisions is a unidirected movement. So our constitution can be said that it's a fountainhead of policies, rules and regulation, is framed on the basis of our constitutional provisions. So education as a means to achieve ends, fulfill the needs of society. So the provision to serve as beacons for the process of development of education. So so there are a lot of constitutional amendments that had happened in terms of educational, your educational attainment. Constitutional provision, Article 28, freedom to attend religious instruction. Then you have many, your constitutional, because of your constitutional provisions, your educational prerogatives are being changing. Otherwise, your constitution will not bring any educational changes, then how you'll find educational change? So Article 29 again talks about the cultural and educational rights of the citizen. Then your Article 30 talks about the rights of minorities to establish and administer educational institutions. Then Article 21A, the right of children to free and compulsory education. Okay, right to education. It was enacted on 4th August 2009. Age group of 16 to 14 years. Then DPSP, Article 4, Part 4 of the Constitution, Directive Principles of State Policy. Under it, you have Article 41, Article 45, Article 46. Then you have fundamental duties, 51A. Then you also have union list. Union list, you have various entries like, entry 63, entry 64. This is all related to your education. And then you also have, under the state list, you have, 12 entries. Then you have concurrent list, you have certain entries in terms of, education. Then your Article 341, 343, Article 15, it talks about your education, constitutional provisions of education. So there are national policies on education also, educational policies that are framed by various agencies, the national, the state agencies, okay. The national policies prevail over state policies. You can also say that though, it's in a concurrent list, but the national policies also always prevail over the state policies. The changing socio-economic milieu also brings new thinking on education. Then policies on education, but these policies on education has been changing. As I told you, it's a dynamic, it's dynamic, it's a process. So there are, on the other hand, there are also certain central legislations on education. Okay. The central legislations of education. One second. Yes. The UGC Act, of 1956. UGC is the University Grants Commission. Then the All India Council for Technical Education, AICTE, in 1987. Then is the National Council of Teacher Education, 1993. Then you have the National Council for Minority Educational Institutions Act, 2004. Then the Copyright Act, 1957, Apprentices Act, 1961, Persons with Disabilities Act, 1995. So, yes, and then you have national policies on education, national policy on education, 1968. So several policies were formulated on various aspects of education. For instance, a policy was made that the state should put in strenuous effort to implement Article 45 and provide free and compulsory education to children. So various national policies on education is also important. So national policy on education is important. National policy on education, 1986. So these are all factual details of what education policies are been taken up in and what are the educational we have in our constitution. So then there is a program of action. These all are implemented in the constitution. So the national, so education has been considered, the role and essence of education in the NP is to be essential for all. Education has to be essential for all, and it is a fundamental to all-round development, both material, spiritual. So this, all-round development, education should take care of all-round development. So this is the essence and the role of education that is considered under the national policy on education. So there is national system of education. Then education for equality, because education attainment has been very unequal in recent days. There are a lot of SC different groups who are excluded from attainment of education, the SCs, the STs. So efforts have been made to uplift the weaker and the neglected sections of society, like women, the SCs, the STs, so that they will also attain education. So the policy aspires to use education as an agent of basic change in the status of women. The status of women is also, very weak. So, there also has to be, it also has to be changed. Okay, so reorganization, there is also, reorganization efforts are also being taken up at different stages, like the early child care and education, and then the elementary education, the non-formal education. Then, there are also some, reforms in the secondary education, then vocationalization. Also, there is an effort to vocationalization of education. Vocationalization in the introduction of well-planned and rigorously implemented program of vocational education was also, envisioned as it is crucial for educational reorganization. Okay, so then also were changes in higher education, which contributes to national development through the dissemination of specialized knowledge and skills. So you also have changes in, there is also introduction of open universities and distance learning, which we have already discussed. Okay, so and there has been an effort to delinking degrees from jobs. The concept of rural university is also very important. The new pattern of rural university will be consolidated and developed on the lines of Mahatma Gandhi's ideas on education, so as to take up the challenge of micro planning at the grassroots. At the grassroots level also, you need to have planning for education. So rural universities fill this gap in which offering education at the grassroots level. Making the effort is, towards making the system work, reorienting the content and process of education. So efforts are being made at all levels to your constitution, your how, the content of education is would be changed, and how would be modified, and how it would be accessible to everyone. So that is the important point. This involved the following, like there is also a reorientation of, content and process of education, which involved the cultural perspective, how, cultural education, value education, these will also be given importance. And then the evaluation process and examination reform, also there is a lot of, reforms in examination and evaluation process also. Okay, so so uh, uh, so there has been a lot of reforms that have been taken up, like the de-emphasis of on memorialization, like memorization. You always, tend to memorize everything, but memorizing will not, you will not land up anywhere if you memorize things. You have to understand things. So, de-emphasize memorization should be there. Memorization should not be there. So, de-emphasizing memorization, and then the elimination of excessive elements of chance, subjectivity, and then improvement in the conduct of exams, the use of grades in place of marks. This is also important achievement. You find your FGPA or CGPA rather than your marks, so which are given, now, so that, the gradation system is a bit improved, and it doesn't feel that those who are getting up to a certain mark is feeling inferior to the person who is like just 5 marks or 6 marks ahead of that person. So there is also reforms in terms of the teacher education, the management of education, and various, resources. Right? So, and the future, according to NP, the future shape of education, but the future of education in India is complex. with to envision with precision, because India is a vast country with so much diversity. You have caste, you have class, you have so many other complexities that the Indian society has. So because India is too complex, so the future of education in India is difficult to predict. So so yet, given our tradition, which is almost always put a high premium on intellectual and spiritual attainment, we are bound to succeed in achieving with our objectives. The main task is to strengthen the base of the pyramid, with about 1 billion people. The base of the pyramid has to be strong. It has to be made accessible to everyone. Each one of the population should get education. So so these are the issues which, when you talk about education scenario, I have given you a detailed picture of how education system in SARC has developed, how education system in Europe has developed. You also knew about the education system in your own country, and then you have arrived at how education system developed from a very traditional to a very modern setup, and how from the Vedic age to a post independence age, what are the constitutional provisions of education, how are we improving educational sector, what are the aims, objectives of improvement, what are the constituents of the improvement education sector. So you find a lot of diversity in education sector, and there are a lot of things which need to be addressed. So we have discussed at length regarding this. So in to conclude, I will say that since independence, there has been a considerable growth and expansion of education in India. Okay, the goal of the modern education is to strive for egalitarianism, though equalization of educational opportunities, and also to enable itself to meet the challenge of modern world. But irrespective of all the efforts that has been taken up by education, by reforming education, many things also need to be addressed. Many challenges still remain. Okay, so this is, I think I am I was able to
So, ma'am, you may now you can discuss the 25 minutes.
Sir, will it be, is it possible to keep it for the next class?
No, it's up to you.
Sir, will be good if we keep it for the next class.
Okay, fine. Okay, then students, then if any query, any question, then you put forth to ma'am.
ସାର୍ ଆକ୍ଚୁଆଲି ମୋତେ କିଛି ଆସାଇନମେଣ୍ଟ ବିଷୟରେ ପଚାରିବାର ଥିଲା।
ପଚାରନ୍ତୁ।
ସାର୍ ମୁଁ ଆସାଇନମେଣ୍ଟ ଫାର୍ଷ୍ଟ ଇୟରର ମେଲ୍ କରିଦେଲିଣି ପ୍ରାୟ 1 month ହବ, ତ ମୋ ପାଖକୁ ଏଯାଏଁ କନଫର୍ମେସନ ମେଲ୍ ଆସିନି।
So actually you are getting huge number of assignment. So number of people is less. So downloading the assignment, you have to download the assignment. So don't worry, you are sending the assignment to us. Definitely received us, and you are processing that. Wait for a few more days, because due to the pandemic, the staffs are not coming to the office regularly. So that is taking time, but don't worry, you will do that. It's not your headache, it's our headache.
ମୁଁ ମେଲ୍ ଆଇଡି ଆସାଇନମେଣ୍ଟ BBSR1 ରେ କରିଥିଲି ସେଣ୍ଡ।
I mean, there is no problem at all. Okay, once you will go to the office and you will check it out. Okay, otherwise you send a mail to us, rcbhuvaneshwar@ignou.in. You send a mail to us. Okay, then you will see what is the status.
Thank you.
Any question? Learners, any question? At least ma'am has delivered 4 units, and now 2 hours 15 minutes non-stop. You had listened, but you don't have any question. How do you feel this class today? Okay, you put forth your doubts. Whatever your doubts, please kindly put forth. ପିଲାମାନେ କିଛି କୋଶ୍ଚିନ୍ ଯଦି ଅଛି ପଚାର। or we'll wind up the session. No question, not a single question.
No, was I able to, communicate with you properly? Communication रे किसी problem थिला? You could be able to understand what I was saying?
I will. Okay, students, still. ପିଲାମାନେ କୁହନ୍ତୁ ମ୍ୟାଡାମ ଯାହା ପଚାରୁଛନ୍ତି।
ମୁଁ କହିଲି where I was able to communication ସମସ୍ତଙ୍କ ସାଙ୍ଗରେ ଠିକ ଥିଲା, ତମେ ବୁଝି ପାରୁଥିଲ ମୁଁ ଯାହା କହୁଥିଲି? Were you able to understand what I was saying?
आज्ञा मैडम सब किसी ठीक ठाक सब थिला। मोर गोटे सर रिक्वेस्ट अच्छी कि आपण जो इंग्लिश मीडियम रे पीडीएफ छाड़ी थिले टिके हिंदी मीडियम रे छाड़ी परिबे कि सर?
हिंदी मीडियम रे पीडीएफ देखियो पड़ियो।
हिंदी मीडियम रे
ई ज्ञान कोश रे सर्च कर जदी मिल जिवो।
आज्ञा सर सुबिलानी
ମୁଁ ଦେଖିବି ଯଦି ଥିବ ମୁଁ ନିଶ୍ଚୟ ଦେବି। ଓକେ, I will check it out. I am not sure Hindi medium PDF is there or not. I will check it out, then I will tell you. Any question to ma'am? Then we will wind up the session. Ma'am, I am giving the remarks. Really, it is an excellent presentation.
Thank you
I
so
am
much, sir.
really impressed upon this presentation. I don't
Thank
know
you,
what
sir.
students is, I mean, feel about this, but it's really very informative. I mean, very simple language, and it's really, I mean, I really appreciate your presentation.
Thank you,
I
sir.
mean, I'm not praising just like that. I'm really impressed. I don't
Thank
know
you,
what
sir.
students feel that. It's very informative.
No, sir, I
Thank
will
you,
try
ma'am.
to, bring in more examples in the, if I am given, yeah, I will bring in more examples so
See
that
what
people
I'm telling you.
understand.
Covering 4 minutes is not a
Okay,
small thing now, because
okay, sir.
lot of things is there.
Okay,
Covering
sir.
4 minutes in a day, it's a
Hmm.
Herculean task. So definitely things should be squeezed out. Anyway,
Okay.
so by these words, it's a lot of time is gone. I mean, I'm just want to conclude the session. Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you all
Thank you,
the
sir.
learners. I
Thank
mean,
you, everyone.
with these words, I'm today's session is end. Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.